Welcome back. Tekrar merhaba. Aramıza yeni katılanlar için şu hatırlatmayı yaparak başlamak istiyorum bu oturuma. İngilizce ve Türkçe dil değişimleri için Interpretation bölümünden İngilizce ve Korean seçeneklerini seçebilirsiniz. Böylece çevirileri yapmış olursunuz anlık olarak tercümeleri. I would like to make the following announcements for the participants who just joined. For English or Turkish interpreting, there is a button at the bottom of the screen. For English, please click on English. For Turkish, please click on Korean. Dear participants, the Fifth International Congress of Technology Addiction proceeds with the second session of the day and fifth panel of the Congress. The chair of this session will be Professor Peyami Çelikcan, chair of the Green Crescent Scientific Committee and Dean of the Faculty of Economics, Administrative and Social Sciences at İstinye University, who will be joined by researchers, each more important than the others. First of all, I would like to briefly introduce our session speakers. Mr. Kam Adaer, joining us from Thailand, is the founder of Game Quitter. Game Quitter. He will give a presentation on Ready Player 2021, Gaming Disorder, Streaming and Esports. Türkiye'den katılan Sayın Profesör Doktor Kemal Sayar, Marmara Üniversitesi Ruh Sağlığı ve Hastalıkları Anabilim Dalı Tıp Fakültesinde görev yapmaktadır.
Professor Dr. Kemal Sayar, attending from Turkey, is an academic member of Marmara University and the Department of Mental Health and Diseases, the Faculty of Medicine. And then there is Erna Yalas. She is the head of the corporate communication in Istanbul, Erkek High School, Education Foundation Schools. She is going to talk about virtual exhaustion, and then we have Associate Professor Orhan Gürsu, who is an academic member of Akdeniz University in the Department of Philosophy and Religions Department. He is going to talk about technology, addiction, and religion in combating that. You may have the floor, sir. Thank you very much. Now we say the screen is yours instead of the rostrum is yours. Thank you very much, distinguished Cansu Canan. We are very happy for your support in all the activities. So you have made all the explanations and done my job instead of myself. I hope I didn't exceed my duty. No, you have facilitated. Thank you very much. The Fifth International Technology Congress. We are here at the fifth international event, and it is held virtually. Actually, those who have attended this Congress before, we used to enjoy a very colorful, vibrant, and productive sequence of sessions in great event halls. Hopefully, the next event will be held face-to-face in Istanbul. It is the fifth session. So it means that we have heard a lot of presentations from invaluable presenters and researchers. Some of them were speakers at the panel, some of them were keynote speakers, and they have all elaborated on the researches on addictive behaviors. And today, in the fifth session, we are hosting very valuable speakers, and we are going to touch upon different dimensions of the problem. The first presentation will be made in English, and the next two will be in Turkish. So you will be using the interpretation segment. After this short introduction, I also would like to speak in English.
Dear participants, welcome to the fifth panel of this International Congress on Technology Addiction organized by Yeşilay in Turkey. So we have been discussing problems regarding to the technology addiction in different countries. So we have this chance to share our experiences, research, and data regarding to this problem from different countries. So this Congress make this possible, sharing common experiences, sharing common results of the research in this field. One of our presenter is from Thailand, Mr. Kem Adair. I hope I pronounce well your name. If it is wrong, please correct me. Welcome, Mr. Adair. Mr. Adair is one of the popular researchers in this field. He has a wonderful YouTube channel, and there are so many followers. His videos has been watched by millions of people from all over the world. But at the same time, he has an organization, Game Quitters. This is serving people, I hope, more than 90 countries in all over the world. So by using the new technologies, digital media actually, he has been trying to share his experiences, ideas, research on specifically game addiction. So game addiction has been becoming a rising issue in all over the world. Because of that, his presentation is going to be a very important presentation for us. We will be able to follow what is going on in different countries since Mr. Adair has contact with different countries, people in different countries. So he will share his view and findings on this issue. Now I will give the screen to Mr. Adair for his presentation. Screen is yours, Mr. Adair.
Thank you so much. It's a true honor to be here. And I remember seeing the Congress a number of years ago, and I'm really excited to see that it has returned. And I look forward to being in Istanbul for the next one in person. As the introduction shared, my name is Cam Adair, and our organization, GameQuitters.com, serves people in 95 different countries, including in Turkey. And I remember my first trip to Istanbul, I guess this would have been 4 or 5 years ago, meeting with a family there who was really struggling and really trying to find more answers and get better education and really be able to understand how they could improve their family life working with this issue. So in my presentation, in the short period of time that I have, I'm going to share mostly about lived experience perspectives when it comes to gaming disorder. What sort of experience or insights or findings do we have from the Game Quitters community, and especially as it relates to COVID, as it relates to the different ways that the gaming world or the gaming industry has grown through esports and through streaming as well. Just to be transparent, I am the founder of Game Quitters, and I am the founder of Intenta, and I am a consultant and advisor for Kindbridge. I got into this work through my own personal journey. I was a fairly normal Canadian kid growing up. I liked to go to school, I liked to play hockey, and I liked to play video games. I'm 33 years old, and it's an interesting age to consider because I remember when there was dial-up internet. And then I remember when we got high-speed internet. I'm very much that first generation of boys who grew up with high-speed internet, which enabled online gaming. Now, gaming initially was just a fun activity I had to kind of relax or decompress after school and hockey. But when I began to experience a lot of bullying, that changed to become an escape. And gaming was a very effective escape for me. It was a place where I could play all day long. I felt safer because if people were being mean or bullying me online, I could block them or move to a different game or move to a different server or just close my computer. Whereas at school, I couldn't really control if kids were bullying me. Kids would chase me around the school. Kids would be mean to me at hockey. And I had to be in those environments, to go to school and to play hockey. So gaming was a much safer place for me to be. And I do think that that is an important insight that we consider as people who struggle with gaming disorder, that the online world is a much easier place to control your experience. So if you struggle with anxiety in other areas, whether it's social anxiety or just general anxiety, the online world may be a much safer environment or a much more consistent environment for you. Hence, you'll spend more time there. Now, I'm not going to share too much more of my story because it'll take a while, but more or less, I dropped out of high school. I never went to college. I was gaming up to 16 hours a day, all day, every day. And eventually I wrote a suicide note. And it was that night when I realized I need to make a change. Now, when I searched for help online, there wasn't really any help. This was back about 10 years ago. And thankfully, I did start working with a counselor, and this counselor really helped me to begin to work on why was I feeling anxious, why was I feeling depressed, and how could I start to do normal life responsibilities like to get a job, to improve my education, to make friends, and to move forward. Now, one of the things that I discovered was I was not the only person who was seeking help. I was not the only person looking online for answers. And when I shared my story, this was back in 2013, I began to hear from tens of thousands of people all over the world saying, I'm struggling with gaming. I can't stop. It's affecting my education. It's affecting my employment. It's affecting my relationships. And I want to do something about it. Now, I think this is such an interesting demographic to consider because often, for clinicians or therapists, the person presenting with the issue may not be the one who's motivated to come for treatment. It may be the family who is, maybe using leverage to bring them there. And yet, for game quitters, many of the people who are seeking help are the individual themselves. Now, currently, we get about 75,000 people a month who search for help on the website. 60% are between 18 and 24 years old. The majority are 18 to 32, and 90% identify as male. Now, over the past 2 or 3 years, we've seen an increase in the number of female gamers and LGBTQ gamers coming forward looking for help. We have also seen an increase in spouses seeking help for their partner. Now, over the course of the last 10 years, we've had 55,000 journal entries recorded by individuals in the community, and about 30% of people now are searching for help as parents or as family members or loved ones. Now, I just checked recently, earlier today, and our peer support community on Reddit, which is called Stop Gaming, had over 100,000 people, unique people searching for help last month. And so I think this is always an important context to remember that there are a lot of people out there seeking help, whether they're the individual or they're a family member. They're looking for education, and whether or not they have a diagnosed gaming disorder, or whether or not they're just struggling with gaming, it's causing conflict at home and so forth. These are problems that they are having, and they do need support for in many different ways and in many different languages. So this is just a quick screenshot of our online forum where people are supporting each other and sharing different strategies and tips. To learn from this demographic, we put a study together with the help of Dr. Daniel King and John B. Saunders in 2018, and it's on the clinical predictors of gaming abstinence in help-seeking adult problematic gamers. Now, it was published in Psychiatry Research, and I'll share a little bit about it along with some context to consider as you go forward, especially in research areas we could be looking at. So we screened adult gamers who were seeking help to voluntarily abstain from gaming, at least temporarily. And we wanted to identify the different variables that might predict someone who would be successful with a short-term commitment to gaming abstinence. We evaluated the level of gaming activity, the history of gaming, game type preferences, symptoms of gaming withdrawal, maladaptive gaming beliefs, and mood symptoms as well. Now, the assumption was that the greater presence and severity of risk factors may reduce someone's ability to be successful to meet their abstinence goals. 186 adult gamers went through the process. We looked at people who were over 18 years old, who met at least 5 criteria of the DSM-5 criteria on internet gaming disorder, and that they personally acknowledged that they had a gaming problem. And we asked them to commit to abstain from gaming for at least 7 days. And we had a 1-week follow-up survey. Now, there were 2 groups that were formed. There were the abstainers and non-abstainers or dropouts. Now, absence was indicated by responses to 2 items. Since the previous survey, have you played video games? And in the past week, how many days have you spent gaming? Now, we had everyone from 18 to 48 years old, but as we've seen throughout kind of our work, the average age was about 24. Often these are young adult males who should be in college or are in college. Now, 95% of participants were male, most were single, most were unemployed, and most were white. So some demographics and gaming-related characteristics. There were no significant group differences between abstainers and non-abstainers in demographics or age when they first started gaming. Now, this is, I think, something worth considering. The average age of a gamer in our group started gaming at 8 years old. Today, gamers start far younger at 1, 2, 3, or 5 years old. So as we go forward, I think it's going to be very interesting to see what's the impact on prevalence or what's the impact on gaming as it's introduced significantly earlier. Now, there was also no significant group difference when it came to weekly amount of time spent gaming. The average for our members was 31 hours per week of gaming and weekly use of other online activities, such as reading gaming news, using forums, watching YouTube or Twitch or other streaming platforms, was also 18 hours a week average. So the average member of our community was spending 49 hours a week either gaming or in other online activities. Now, there was a mix of solo and multiplayer games and playing games with real-life friends. Now, the typical gaming history was between 10 and 20 years, and we know from some other industry numbers that the average player is about 33 years old and has been playing for about 14 years. I think we'll also see that average time someone has been playing also continue to increase as they start far younger. Now, there was a significant group difference between abstainers and non-abstainers, and that was abstainers were significantly less likely to play action shooter games. And I think, it relates to some other studies that have found that more first-person shooter, more competitive-based games tend to rate higher for people struggling with gaming or gaming disorder than other types of games. Now, baseline mood symptoms and disordered gaming characteristics. There were also no significant group differences when it came to internet gaming disorder criteria, the onset of current gaming-related problems, or the number of separate occurrences of these problems in the past. Now, I do think it's worth noting that from our members, we found that over 70% of them had felt 3 or more occurrences of gaming-related problems in the past. There was also no significant group differences when it came to gaming cognition scores, craving and withdrawal symptoms, or mood symptoms and quality of life. Now, in relation to intentions to abstain from or just simply reduce gaming, half of the group wanted to quit indefinitely, whereas other subgroups existed through Discord and Twitch and YouTube, I think it's going to be much more difficult for specifically a young person to abstain from gaming completely due to the social implications that may exist, especially just conversation topics at school. So I do think that that is something that we need to be looking at and understanding how we address that, especially in treatment. Now, when it comes to the internet gaming disorder symptom profile, a number of the most frequently endorsed items were using gaming despite harm and unsuccessful. When we look at tolerance and deception, they were the least frequently endorsed items, although I find tolerance, especially if we take King's study on tolerance into consideration around tolerance being less about needing to play more and increasingly becoming about needing to spend more and more money. I think as in-app purchases have come into games, that's also something we should really be evaluating. Is tolerance maybe a bit more about needing to spend money now and less about needing to play more and more? Now, the majority of participants, over 85%, reported their gaming had been a problem for over 12 months. Often, gamers who have a problem are aware that they might have a problem. They might not want to admit it. They might not want to, or they may be not overly receptive, we'll say it that way, to family members or other individuals suggesting they have a problem. But often, someone who's playing games too much is experiencing the different problems in different areas of their lives. And I think it's much more about how we communicate about those with them in order to enroll them in finding more balance. Now, the success or the significant group differences for abstainers, they did tend to report significantly lower endorsement of withdrawal symptoms. And I find withdrawal as a symptom is interesting because obviously it's one of the more debated criteria for whether or not there's a gaming disorder. Yet in our community, if you read the journals, we regularly have people reporting withdrawal symptoms, cravings, urges to play, mood swings, headaches, just difficulty being able to cope with the cravings that they get when they stop playing. Some key takeaways and things to consider as we go forward. Abstainers were significantly less likely to play action shooter games than non-abstainers. It may be that shifting to different game types may help someone reduce their problematic gaming. An example from COVID was many people were playing Animal Crossing. It was much more of a pro-social game. Compare that to a Call of Duty that's fast-paced action, high competition, and just in my experience, Call of Duty is a game that would be more of a problem for me. So sometimes maybe shifting game types might be an option. Participants with mood symptoms tended to report significantly more internet gaming disorder symptoms and stronger maladaptive gaming conditions, worse quality of life, and more occurrences of disordered gaming. Now, participants with mood symptoms in our study was 40% of the total. So those experiencing anxiety or depression were significant. But there's also quite a few of our participants who were not reporting or meeting criteria for moderate or more severe depression or anxiety. Yet often is it gaming disorder or is it an underlying mental health condition like anxiety or depression is a really hot topic. And so I do think it's important that we're continuing to look at those who are not meeting criteria for mood symptoms, yet still do have problematic gaming symptoms. There was also no significant group differences in the amount of time they spent gaming or their intentions to reduce or stop. And we found that adults with problematic gaming may benefit from strategies on reducing or managing their withdrawal symptoms and understanding the different risky types of gaming activities. So I think those are some insights that we've had from our community over the last few years, and I hope that you found that valuable. I guess the one idea I'll leave you with is that as gaming continues to grow, as esports continues to grow, as streaming continues to grow, just the entire ecosystem of the gaming world continues to converge a lot with our culture, especially for young people. I think it's very important that we understand how we prevent problems from occurring, how we teach families to navigate these issues, and how we empower players to play in a safe way. Maybe for some individuals that may be about choosing the right game instead of not gaming at all, whereas for some other players, not playing at all may be a better path forward. But thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to answer questions when the time is right for that.
Well, thank you, Mr. Cem Adair. You provided significant data on gaming. From your data in your presentation, we understood that people spent 31 hours per week for gaming, and for other online activities, it is around 18 hours. So means that people spend almost 7 hours per day, and half of it dedicated for gaming. This is a very long period in a day, 7 hours. I just wonder if it differs according to different countries. For example, do you have any data regarding to Turkey or in this region, some other countries in this region? So this hours per day may vary according to the countries, or almost the same?
For us, we didn't notice a significant difference amongst different countries, but I'd be very curious, and I could do this to go and look at the data more closely about that specific question. In my experience, we haven't noticed a big difference across members from different countries, especially those from more European countries and Western countries. So overall, our experience has been fairly consistent, but I'd like to explore that further for sure.
Yeah, thank you. We will have more questions at the end of the panel. So we will switch to our Turkish presenters. So I will switch to Turkish if you don't mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Değerli katılımcılar,
distinguished participants, now we are going to
one of the significant problems of our age, especially in the period of pandemics, this has become an important problem.
That is very important nowadays.
Virtual fatigue. Under the pandemic conditions, as we are becoming more engaged in online activities and as we spend more time in front of the screen, we have many problems. And for different demographic groups, the scope and the nature of the problem and the severity of the problem may change. But almost all segments of the society are facing with the similar challenges and difficulties. On one side, families are concerned about their families. Adults are concerned about themselves. And the extensive period of time that we spend in front of the screen brings both emotional, cognitive, and physical problems. Dr. Kemal Sayar, when we speak about these topics, he's one of the prominent experts in Turkey. He is Dr. Kemal Sayar. And together with his colleague, Berna Yalaz, Kemal Sayar and Berna Yalaz will have a presentation on virtual fatigue. I give the floor to Dr. Kemal and Ms. Berna for their presentation on virtual fatigue. Hello. Our presentation consists of two parts. Our topic is virtual fatigue. I will be giving general information about virtual fatigue, and Professor Kemal Sayar will tell about the reasons and effects of virtual fatigue. He will have a detailed presentation about the reasons and the effects. Now I will start sharing the slides of the presentation on virtual fatigue.
Aralık 2019'da dünyada
in December 2019 and in March 2020, corona pandemic started at global level, and we have seen many changes in paradigms in our world, and when we have the time and our sense of time and space changed all of a sudden, and school, education, work, and house-related routines of many centuries changed all of a sudden, and our houses were no longer a temporary or permanent and magical location that protects us, and our houses became schools and work offices. And for a period of 14 months, we are living all together in our houses, but we are living separately in our rooms in an interactive life. And no one could think that a virus pandemic would accelerate this informatic revolution. Nobel awarded biologist Sir Peter Medower said, a piece of bad news that is covered in protein. This generation had this bad news, unfortunately. The uncertainty and anxiety that surrounds us is challenging us cognitively and emotionally. We are social beings, and when we are separated from the communities that we belong to, our emotional and our mental systems are alarming. We are seeking to become a part of that community again, but we cannot have those physical connections, and we have substituted our connections with digital networks. These social networks and digital networks became the new neural system of our community. All those processes related to school, work, education, we try to maintain these processes on digital platforms. There is a quotation from Macbeth of Shakespeare: when you don't have more problems, you either your problems are sufferings either end or it goes back to previous position. Our experience of pandemics is similar. Now we have Baudrillard's passive indifference. That is closing ourselves to the information, epistemological closing, shutting down, because when people's commitment to their own beliefs and opinions is very strong, and everyone is searching for evidences and using social media to find evidences that will prove or that will evidence its belief or its opinion. In our age, social media use is very widespread, and it's very easy to reach information. Everyone is creating their own reality, and there is too much of disinformation. And there is we have a kind of epistemological shutting down. And once upon a time, the conspiracy theories also increased a lot. There is a psychology behind this increase. This is complementary. If we are not on the wheel, it is either a very strong ally or a very strong enemy that is taking control. This is a comforting belief, but starting with the pandemics, these are not the only emotions and feelings we experience with pandemics. We lost our taste in life at the beginning of pandemic. That very strong fight or flee feeling later on evolved into this languishing, a feeling of lack of taste. We don't see the symptoms of a psychological disorder, but we do not have a full well-being. We don't have depression, we don't have anxiety, but we have a loss of meaning and motivation. Maybe this languishing was the most widespread feeling in the last year. We have lack of focusing and attention. We are working less and we are more inefficient, our work. And this term, languishing, was coined by a sociologist. And in his studies, he found that people do not suffer in depression, but they are not in a full well-being. And according to his estimation, these people suffering from languishing will highly probable that suffer major depression or anxiety disorders. And there was a study on the pandemic health professionals in Italy which supports this estimation. These people might suffer post-trauma stress disorder. When compared to their peers, they have 3 times more probability of suffering post-trauma stress disorder. How can we overcome this languishing feeling? There are many methods to overcome and cope with it. Being in the flow makes us happy all the time. This flow, both it is a melting of our sense of identity and sense of time and space, and it's a self-immersion. When you are engaged in something that you like, you feel this flow. Or if you are a part of a very big cause, something that is bigger than a cause that is bigger than us, when we are committed to it, we feel this flow. What else can we do about it? A little bit, we can have uninterrupted times for ourselves. There are some interesting terms about many people started to sleep late at night during the pandemic because there are many things that they cannot do during daytime, and they are staying awake till late night to compensate for what they cannot do during daytime. There are some dynamics of pandemics that are multifunctional. We are multifunctional. We are just confined in a single space, all house, workplace, education, everything is in a single house environment, and it is splitting us, and there is hyper attention following up many of the things simultaneously. And it's a continuous partial attention on various functions is making us very tired. We can focus on just small targets and objectives that makes us happy. And finally, pandemic is obliging virtual communication, and this is causing a virtual fatigue and psychological, emotional, and physiological impacts of this. Video conference platforms are became a part of our life for continuation of education and work related functions, and video conference meetings were also very comfortable. Previously, many of the studies conducted about video conference meetings, it is energy and environment efficiently, and it requires less energy when compared to physical real life conferences. But on the other hand, these studies also show that the people have higher rate of errors in the instructions or feedbacks on online environments and conferences, because we can be distracted very easily in online conferences. But one thing is common, all these studies, the studies conducted so far, many of the studies were for video conference platforms used under 1 hour only. If you have a video conferencing for 10 hours, for instance, watching ourselves and talking about, this was not something that we were expecting, and it's something unprecedented for media history and for human history. Seeing yourself on the screen for many long hours is something very new, and we are operating our daily routines on the virtual environments. The antique virtual environments became, now there's a new dimension on our cognitive and emotional space perception. We have the time and space just confined in virtual environment. We have rituals, and they are disappearing all of a sudden, and these rituals are also disappearing. But we have to continue with this, because without having these spaces, you cannot have a civilization. We continue our own existence on virtual platforms and spaces. Zoom has become a generic name for video conference platforms. Marketing professionals know about it. In a product category, if you are using one brand, just generic name is the brand name that is used to define all the, for instance, if you say the name says Blue Jean, or if a shaving razor as Gillette, Zoom became, although it's a brand, it became a generic name for virtual meeting platforms. We are using it as a daily word across different languages. Come to Zoom, join to Zoom, let's meet on Zoom. I'm at the, accept me, or I'm in the waiting lounge, like this. I will share some figures about use of Zoom. In December 2019, there was 10 million Zoom users, and in a period of just 5 months, it increased to 3,300 millions. The financial turnover increased 3 times when compared to previous year, and its value increased from stock exchange value increased from 16 billion US dollars to 42 billion US dollars, and the download of Zoom increased well beyond Pokemon Go and TikTok apps, which were the most. The download figures increased more 300 million. Turkey is one of the top 5 countries where the users of Zoom increased most. The regional director of Zoom had a speech about it, and it was telling about the Mediterranean people and Mediterranean culture who likes socialization. It has some other dynamics. We are one of the countries that is using Zoom widely for education purposes across country. Our relationship with Zoom or all these video conference platforms that we will name Zoom, at the end of 1 year now, it remembers one thing to us, that a long forgotten truth. Each new technology, you have to be cautious about it, because each new technology has mass death risks. We have come to realize it after 14 months. This Zoom fatigue just introduced to the literature. Now we are discussing about what's Zoom fatigue, what are the reasons, and what are its impacts. Now I give the floor to Professor Kemal Sayar to give about the reasons and the impacts of Zoom fatigue. Thank you very much, Dr. Berna, for this wonderful introduction and presentation. Maybe some of the colleagues might not be familiar. Dr. Berna Yalaz, we have co-authored 2 books. One is Virtual Love, our first book, Virtual Romance, and the one is Network. And nowadays, we are working on digital fatigue, and we would like to share a part of our book in this presentation on virtual fatigue. I will make an introduction. In face-to-face interaction, there is a human element. For face-to-face interaction, we hear people's voice. We look at their pupils, and we see their facial expressions, and the small changes, tiny bit changes in their voices, we can feel it. But when we have screen communication, we are skipping many of nuances. Therefore, for screen communication, for my perspective, is an decreased reality, not the augmented, but decreased reality, feeling of decreased reality. When we are thinking about many other things, and there are many other things going around in the environment. When you look at one person, and a mother of a primary school teacher colleague said, children now come to realize that they are pretending to be listening on the camera, and they are just freezing that still image, and the teachers cannot understand if they are still listening or they are pretending to be listening with a fixed image. Yeah, there are back doors of each technology, and every technology is very open to abuse and manipulation. When we say Zoom fatigue, there are 4 main characteristics and components. One is excessive looking at the screen without eye contact. Our cognitive load is increased, and the number of information that we receive in our mind is too much, overloaded the cognitive skill. And we are seeing our own face throughout the communication. It's like looking at the mirror all the time. Just remember how tiring it's to look at the mirror, and we have decreased mobility. We are still fixed behind the screen. So this too much close and long eye contact, there are some problems about continuous and long period of eye contact. The face dimensions and how long period of time we look at the face are very decisive factors. We want to be liked by the people, or we can have a feeling of threat from the looks of the people on the screen, or we can have a feeling of deficiency from the other person's image. Here we will see in a Zoom interview, from the top to the chin, it's 13 centimeters in Zoom platform, but in face-to-face communication, the distance should be 50 centimeters to have this dimension. And our personal safe zone spaces is 60 centimeters. That is to say, throughout all Zoom meetings, our personal space is intrude and it's violated, and we experience this feeling of our personal space is being violated. Although we think that we get used to this, but it's also we have some archaic fears about this personal safe zone. And in face-to-face communication, we can adjust our eye contact frequency and we observe a balance about it. But in Zoom platforms, the screen can be blacked and we can turn off the camera. It's a very easy for us. But for the speaker, this is not a good thing. You do not see the audience's faces. You are speaking to black screens sometimes. And that speaker would not feel himself at ease for speaking in an organic speech, or might not have hesitations and concerns about whether the audience is understanding him because he cannot see the faces of the people listening to him. This might cause some vulnerabilities and victimizations. While we are speaking from the eyes and the faces of our target people, we would like to have reactions and feedbacks, whether they understand it, whether people like it, are the people smiling at us, is there curiosity and interest in what we are speaking, do they agree with us, or are they criticizing? In an organic speech, you have the opportunity to observe it at first hand. But in Zoom environment, unfortunately, we don't have this opportunity to see on the faces and eyes of the listeners. There are also continued and long period of eye contact problems. In face-to-face communication, throughout it is less than half of the total communication period but it is a rude behavior to be looking directly into one's eyes in some of the cultures. It's an aggressive behavior in some of Eastern societies, but in American society or community, this can be an indication of honesty and sincerity to look into the eyes. There is a cultural difference between Eastern and Western communities about it. And the dynamics of the environmental dynamics are also affected by the contents. In Zoom, everyone is looking at each other. You have limited opportunities to avoid these looks only if you black out your screen. Both the speaker and the listeners are under spotlights, and the center, the pupil of the eye, is continuously stimulated. There is someone in front of us all the time, and it becomes too much pressing sometimes, and some people feel pressed, and people are sitting and moving in their chairs sometimes because they feel uneasy in their chairs. And one of the reasons of the increased cognitive load is the efforts, the additional effort that we use for trying to set non-verbal communication expressions in a beautiful organic relations. It will take no effort to communicate the messages through non-verbal behaviors. But in Zoom environment, you have to put an effort to communicate these non-verbal messages. In a video conference talk or interviews, when compared to normal speeches, we are talking 15% higher tone in our voice. Sending the message requires an additional effort and you cannot observe and follow up the mood of the listeners, and the eloquence part remains to be lacking here. Good speakers, eloquent speakers, are motivated and moved by the participation of the listeners. Listeners is an interactive thing for speakers. But in Zoom platform, we remain loyal to text, and our eloquent and our public speaking skills are suppressed in Zoom platform because of lack of interaction with the audience. There is a study in 2014 the technical latencies and problems about the phone and teleconferences. It has a negative impact on our perception of the people. Even at 1.2 seconds of delay or latency in communication causes a perception, an increase in perceiving the people negatively or unfriendly. A group of friends in McGill University in Canada, sometimes I am joining to their activities, and the doctor there made a very good funny joke about it. People are saying goodbye, see you later to each other, and each is expecting the other one to leave the meeting. And after one person leaves the meeting, the others follows it. And the doctor there said, this Zoom technology, the most difficult thing in this is being the first person who ends or leaves the meeting. That's really difficult. He said, yeah, it was, in this Zoom platform, it's a little bit difficult thing. Yeah, you need to be courageous, or it's a little bit difficult to be the first one leaving the platform. So we are watching our own image, and this is that Narcissus watching himself in the river. We are not falling in love to ourselves, but we had enough of our own image, and we are fed up with our own image. Watching your own image for a long period of time is quite new for human history. We don't have it. It is unprecedented thing in human history to be watching yourself all the time. The previous studies only had were the interactions to own image for less than 1 hour. But now, for professional, if you have professional platforms, Zoom or other platforms, for many hours you can stay in a meeting and you may not like your own image. For instance, when I first started to this speech, Berna Hanım's library, the other speaker's library. So I thought I should also have a library in my backdrop, and I immediately changed my backdrop to a library, and I said, I have a library, so I should show my library, because Berna Hanım was talking in front of a bookshelves. And according to American Plastic Surgery, there has been a 64% increase in cosmetic consumption. We are obsessed in our own bodies, on our physical appearances, but when we see our faces for extended period of time, and there has been a queue in front of plastic surgeons, and there is decreased mobility. Yeah, we are already complaining about this pandemic gaining weights, and yeah, also there are some colleagues who keep very fit in this period. Congratulations on them, but the mobility is closely related to how much time we spend in front of the screens. The longer period of time we spend on the screens, that is decreased time period. If it's this longer we stay behind in front of the screen, the more we are putting on weight. There is correlation there. There are also cognitive impacts in Turkey. It is making us lazy. We are becoming lazy. Many hours of meetings without leaving the screen is making our young people and our children, to a certain extent, it's making them, it is discouraging them from school and studies, and long period of conferences, the attentions are easily distracted. And when we are active, we are listening better. When we are physically active, we listen better. When you are confined in a small room and when you are listening only without any physical activity, you can be distracted very easily. The illusion is also lost. This illusion is lost in the screen in front of us is confining our, we cannot think of, it is making it very uniform. So, and our creativity, Yahya Kemal, a Turkish poet, says the human existence depends largely on its ability to think and dream. When we are listening to a person, we can give spontaneously our reactions or ask questions to people. On the one hand, we also have a dream. We are dreaming about, we are thinking about, which makes the speech background a larger space of our dreams or our. And also neuropsychological study on Zoom fatigue, and the findings of this neuropsychological study shows that the main fatigue component of fatigue is the cost and reward calculation that we make, we are continuously considering the cost of any possible reward, and this reward is activating dopamine centers in our brain, and it's making us more motivated, energetic. And for face-to-face communication and social communication, it's closely related to our rewarding circuits. Yeah, another look or gesture that is confirming us, curious eyes looking at us, this is rewarding for us, and dopamine is secreted in relevant parts of our brain, very much like hugging the people that we love or touching the people, physical touch. Oxytocin, bond-making hormone, is secreted also, and it is closely related to the rewarding system in our brain. For people who are having functional magnetic resonance images of face-to-face and virtual communication, for face-to-face communication, the activated areas are larger than virtual interaction. We human are social beings, and we born into a social environment, and it is a reward for us. And without that social environment, we feel less of human beings. And the distortion of the neural system physiology can explain Zoom fatigue. For instance, I'm a psychiatrist expert, and before pandemics, I was not ever thinking about these virtual sessions. I am listening to people and trying to consult these on a screen, these online therapy sessions. Yeah, it became a part of my life now. Previously, I was very conservative about these online sessions. I said, no, that is unacceptable. But this is our fate. This is, yeah. We continued our sessions on a virtual environment, but surprisingly, I think it was very effective and efficient sessions on virtual environment. Many colleagues share the same feedback. But after a certain period of time, we have the symptoms of cognitive and mental fatigue. You need to have breaks and some break times for that. And the latency in the audio and visual communication caused by Zoom characteristics, we have negative perception of the people. We are getting angry very quickly. In some of there are some lessons and lectures and societies and academic discussions in virtual environment. When someone cannot make the presentation, when something goes wrong, people get angry very easily. They say, oh, in this age, you cannot do this, that. It escalates very quickly. And we cannot understand the genuineness and the sincerity of the warmness of a look. We are sitting in front of a screen for many hours, but we are not rewarded for it. And we have challenges in understanding the emotions and the feelings. And we are putting lots of effort, but this effort is not rewarded. And this is one of the main components of the Zoom fatigue, not being rewarded for lots of effort. And in a performance community, there is performance anxiety and a performance expectations. We are becoming performing agents or actors of the age. Our egos are, we are living in an age of performance. Living in the age of a pandemic, and it's continuously reminding us the reality of pandemic. Every day, around 200 people are dying each day. This is a world of mourning. We are technology so much occupied our minds, and when someone coughs or someone is coughing in a confined space, cannot think of a world without wearing facial masks. Many of the people to work, to have their employment, people worked for a longer period of time, and now a feeling of being exploited also. Any business model that is evolving into more exploitation sometimes. In people in professional life says, yeah, we could talk a couple of words, we could meet for a lake, and we were reminded of our being human beings. We have our own food, our own coffee in our own rooms, and we are serving and working for longer periods of time. Yeah, people are complaining about this. Our social relations are established and shaped by a certain social context and spatial context. Sometimes we place and remind ourselves in a certain context and space, and we are deprived of this sense of space and time. Sometimes I find myself asking, what's today? Maybe we will talk a little bit about Zoom depressions to make a contribution to the literature. In virtual communication, our brain is at more work, and both cognitively and emotionally. In face-to-face communication, there are verbal cues that we use in face-to-face communication, but in a video conference meeting, we see just the faces and the head of the people. We cannot see their hands, their posture, and their mimics are not visible to us. And we are seeing many of the faces simultaneously, and this is a very challenging thing for our brain. Many of the faces simultaneously at the same time, and we have partial attention to, and this is causing a sense of crisis and being alarmed. Our brain is not adapted to this. Our brain is not evolved to cope with this. When we are exposed to a long period of time, all those stimulation, we cannot create a meaningful integrity from this, and this causes dissatisfaction in people. So if I may wrap up now, the main reason of the Zoom fatigue is not the length of the method of the lack of personal contact or connection with the people in the platform. When we have this type of meetings with the people that we have closer contact, it's more enjoyable and it can be repairing and it is better. If we are at more ease in and with the people that we have a feeling of belonging, we have become the slaves of the working all around the clock work method of capitalism, and we are a continuous communication, and we are closely tied to screens in a digital environment, and it's open to exploitation and manipulation. Our private life can be manipulated and exploited. It's an exploitation, very much open to exploiting human life and private life. And there is a continuous repetition. We are repeating. John Crowley says late capitalism and the end of Sleep's book still a challenging era for capitalism. Sometimes employers are demanding to be working all around the clock, 24 hours and 7 days, and our last fortress, our family life and private life, is being intruded. This is all from our side, and hopefully we will overcome and we will eliminate this pandemic soon, and we will focus our attention to our faces, our looks, our eyes, and our words. And the road to heart goes through the face, in a human face, there is an invitation for being more honest and ethical, and it encourages us to have more and more sympathy for other people in our faces. Therefore, I hope that this will not be the beginning of a new era where we are all digital zombies. I hope it will not be a beginning of a digital age that makes us zombies, but it will be only a reminder for us what's lost in our history, and we will have more motivation and encouragement for being more of human beings and encouraging ourselves to have more organic lives. And thank you very much for your attention, distinguished colleagues. And I would like to extend my thanks to Green Crescent community keeping this technology addiction issue on the agenda all the time.
I would like to thank Kemal Sayar and Ben Aylas for this great presentation. They have talked to us about the virtual fatigue and Zoom fatigue, and we have learned many new concepts, and this will allow us to further understand what we are experiencing. And cognitive load was one of the things that has been revealed here. So there is no boundary between the private life or the business life anymore, and we are all exposed to an unbelievable amount of burden, and it brings along a virtual fatigue. And in addition to the Zoom fatigue, we have now been incurring other fatigues as well. On one hand, we have this Zoom fatigue, and maybe there is another fatigue which we might call Netflix fatigue. So it is an entertainment fatigue that we are experiencing as a result of the lockdowns and due to the abundant amount of time we have, and the people might choose to watch 10 episodes of a soap opera, and that means another fatigue on our side. So I would like to contribute to one thing from their presentation: the physically safe distance. We know it is 60 centimeters, and on such video conference tools there is no need for such a distancing, and Professor Kemal has explained it very well. And because our personal space is violated, we are actually disturbed with our image being on the screen all the time, and there might be some participants who choose not to turn their cameras on. And another private life violation is our private space violation. Our personal places are also on the screens, so the private spaces of ours are also seen on the screens. And actually, this is yet another reason for this fatigue that we have. So the decoration, the visuals in our personal space may also be leading to the fatigue of the people. I'm now proceeding to our final speaker, Orhan Gürsu from Akdeniz University, and he will have a very different approach to the subject, and I am really curious to hear what he has to say. He will be talking to us about religion in fighting against the technology addiction, how it might contribute to prevention of religion, prevention of technology addiction through religion. Thank you very much, distinguished professor. Allow me to turn on my PowerPoint presentation. I think you can see my screen, right? First of all, I am truly honored to participate in this great Congress, and I would like to greet all the participants. Technology addiction has been considered from different perspectives for the last 2 days. I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you please go full screen? Actually, yes, it is now full screen. In terms of solution, some different alternatives have been offered, psychotherapy, rehabilitation, etc. And I will have a different perspective. I am a psychology counselor, and I'm also studying religious philosophy. So I was thinking about the effect of religion on prevention, but I will be considering it from the perspective of neuropsychology mostly. Speaking of technology addiction, we can see a very wide range indeed. There are the smartphones, the laptops, tablet PCs, desktop PCs. So it is a very wide range that we're talking about. And therefore, intense and frequent use of them brings along the technology addiction. As for the percentage, we can see it is 68% smartphones, and then the desktop PCs around 44%. Then comes the tablet PCs and laptops. So what is the purpose of use of technology by the people? We can see that 64% of them are using the technology for social media. So these two are important, using the mobile phones mostly for the social media is important for me, and I will tell you about the findings of my research. Internet addiction is the second title that we need to discuss along with the technology addiction. There are online gambling addiction, social media addiction, pornography, online shopping. So the list goes on and on. Obsessive or problematic internet addiction, what problems does that bring along? When we look at the literature, we can see that internet is an addiction like gambling, and it causes some mental and physical issues, conditions. It leads to lack of sleep, risky sexual orientation, loss of time, nervous breakdowns, signs of deprivation, low self-esteem, isolation, worry, loss of memory, etc. So there are such studies indicating that it might also be relevant to instant gratification. Meerkerk says that the internet addiction, the highest potential internet addiction type, is relevant to erotic and sexual content, because this is where the sexual impulsivity and passion is most commonly used. According to the data from 2015, it is found that 16 million men and women in the States are sex addicts, and half of all the websites on the internet are porno websites. And every second, 30 million people are watching sexual content websites. And the most viewed video on the internet is again a sexual content, and it has been watched more than 1 billion times. So Freud suggests that this is about the instinct of the people in the face of civilization. If the men cannot do without something, it is said they are addicted to that thing. And what does the research say? According to the data from the research, I will tell you, when you look at the increase in depression by years, you can see up until 2010, 2011, it was normal. And starting from 2011, we can see that the rate of depression has substantially increased in the girls especially. So 2011 was a breaking point. As for the rate of suicide and unhappiness, we can see that the suicidal ideation is 48% in the adolescents who use technology for more than 5 hours. As for the self-harm in the States, we can see that there is an increase of 189% in the girls between 10 and 14. So this is again a significant rate. Considering the suicide rates in the States, you can see that there is an increase starting from 2011, and for the girls between 10 and 14, this rate has increased by 151%. So what happened, and why do such data indicate a burst starting from 2011? You can see that in that very year, social media became available on mobile phone. So the depression rates increased, suicidal ideation and suicide and self-harm increased. So there is, as for the believing in God and the holy books, we can see that there is a substantial decrease. There was this documentary called Social Dilemma on Netflix. You can see it. The documentary features the former employees, CEOs, founders, and senior level executives of the social media companies like Pinterest, Facebook, Twitter, and Google. The founder of Pinterest says it is clear that all these services are actually killing the people and causing them to kill themselves, to commit suicide. So probably we will end our civilizations through intentional ignorance. The social media has its objectives. They found the gap in our psychology, and they are attempting to use us through this gap. So those confessions are made by the high-level executives of those companies. That's why I think they are highly important. The people who use the social media very commonly have an immature frontal lobe. I will tell you about the neuropsychology data. In other words, this new way of existing makes the people stupid, actually. I know this is difficult to digest, but I do not say that. The magazine Economist says that using social media makes the people more miserable. This is an article from a newspaper. a 17-year-old man, a 17-year-old boy, sold his kidney for $3,200 on the internet in order to buy an iPad 2. So tell me, what could be so strong to make me sell an organ of myself? So you can easily see that this is actually affecting us very intensely. So why is it so difficult to get rid of those addictions? More critically, what is the source of addiction? There are tens of theories about the source of such addictions. Some say it is genetic disposition, social circumstances. However, the developments, especially in the field of neuroscience, is now giving us very concrete data. With the brain imaging tools, we can now more easily see the brain on the computer screen and understand. So the neuroscientists say that it is the limbic system of the brain and the dopamine channels. Limbic system is about the continuation of our lives, food and drink and sex. So interestingly, when the limbic system is stimulated, you can see that the frontal lobe is responsible for the moral attitude. So this is what makes the man and for formation of our personality and character. Therefore, the neuroscientists say that majority of those addictions are relevant to our dopamine increase in the brain. And if you want to increase the amount of dopamine next time, you have to do it more next time. So you have to increase the screen time. You have to increase the amount of cigarettes or weed that you smoke. So this mechanism in the brain make you do this pleasant thing more and more. So this is not only relevant to internet addiction, but all the other addictions. So there is an experimental study proving everything I have said. In 1950s, James Olds and Peter Milner conducted this study, and it is considered to be the most tragic experimental study of the science world. So you can see the electrode that is installed, the mouse's brain, and it is connected to a button. When the researchers push the button, electrical currents go to the brain, and the mice get that stimulation, and it was found that the mice pushed that button up to 7,000 times in order to stimulate their brains. And the hungry and thirsty mice were pushing the button only without eating anything or drinking anything. So they may forget eating and drinking and just keep pushing the button. Or the male mouse is ready to mate, but it does not see the female mouse, just keeps pushing the button, and the female mouse is not gestating the small mice, and only after they've removed the electrode from their brains, the mice could again think of eating and drinking. So what is this experimental study telling us? My understanding is that if you stimulate the pleasure part of your brain, then your frontal lobe will be deactivated to a great extent. And is the popular culture exactly doing this? Yes, our impulse center is stimulated all the time, and this impulsive nature of the man is relevant to nefsi emare concept, and we can then understand. So I have given you a dark presentation, I know, and it is so dark that your mind is deactivated when you stimulate the impulse center of the brain. So you can more easily understand why the people cannot get rid of such addictions. And what is the religion telling us? So we are unprotected to a great extent in the face of these impulse center, and I will give you 3 examples. One will be protective and preventive, and the other one will be about the religion as a social support. As preventive and protective, the religions want some certain doors not to be opened at all. And for the addiction, it is said that the most effective method is not to open that door at all, not to open the door of the pornography or weed. If you open it, I don't say that it will never close, but it is difficult to close actually. So in terms of preventive and protective psychology, the religion actually prohibits that. Allah says, do not engage in sexual recourse with those. So do not approach, Allah says. So alcohol is forbidden. Everything that makes you drunk is unacceptable. And Quran actually mentions all the substances that actually negatively impact the decision-making process. Therefore, considering this term, we should understand this as not only relevant to gambling or alcohol or sex, but relevant to everything that depresses our brains. There is this hadith by Prophet Muhammad, and the hadith says that if a man is engaged in sexual recourse, his soul goes up in the sky 1 hand above his body. So now I can understand why. Another hadith says the one who doesn't have a mind, an intellect, does not also have iman or belief. So what can we say about this hadith? The neuroimaging indicates that when the limbic system is stimulated, neocortex, where the thinking happens, is deactivated to a great extent. Therefore, I have to say that this hadith 100% matches the current findings. So there is this story. The grandfather and the grandchild speaks, and the grandfather has 2 dogs. One is white and the other one is black. And the grandchild says, if we put them into a fight, which one will win? The white one? The grandfather says, no, the one that I feed. So if our impulsive system is strong, our impulse will decide. If our mind is strong, it will decide. So how can I make sure that the brain makes a decision? So there comes the divine help. The verse in Quran says, does man think that he will be left alone? So Lehrer was saying the neuroimaging activities indicate that amygdala only starts its movements when one thinks of doing wrong things. So God will not leave me alone with myself. So it says we will push him from the forehead, and that part corresponds to the amygdala part of the brain. So how should we understand about this pushing? There is this study in Utah University in 2017, and it is finding that religion also releases pleasure. So what does that mean? It means that you can increase, or you can make sure that this happens with religious practices or by smoking, drinking, and other things. Is that possible? Yes, it is possible. The religious practices, the first is the prayers, and I'm thinking about Islam to a great extent, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this is not present in the other religions. There are many studies about meditation. So what happens during prayer? If you are concentrated, it means the study shows that more tissue is more brain tissues connect to one another. Andrew Newberg's study is indicating that while you are praying, the upper part of the brain is active and the activity is lowered in the part that is responsible for epilepsy, and it helps us make better decisions. Another important benefit of prayer is that you know that you are not alone. During the prayer, the broncho, the speaking part of your brain, is active. And what does that mean? It means that God, it is as if the God is right across you, as if it is a concrete being, not an abstract being. I believe this is highly important in terms of its psychotherapeutic value. So when you go to a therapy, it gives you a catharsis, and we can easily see that this cathartic effect is present here again. So there is so much data, so I have to be very quick because I want to tell you a lot of things. I know I have a limited time. The first benefit of prayer is awareness and the mindfulness. The prayer that you do positively affecting you, and it helps you think more logically. Also, during the prayer, there is an increased activity in the prefrontal cortex. Teheccüd and tefekkür. Teheccüd means the prayer during the night time. It's the most recent studies indicate that it is best if you take a break from your sleep for an hour, and this corresponds to Teheccüd time during in the Islamic culture. And with Teheccüd you do tefekkür, which means contemplation, thinking intensively and extensively. And the studies indicate that the part of the brain that is responsible for memory develops new cells if you are exposed to silence for 2 hours on a regular basis. Fasting, the scientists say that fasting improves your bodily functions and the extreme aspirations of your body, such as motives and feelings and excitements, are being controlled through fasting. The Prophet was suggesting fasting, and these effects, especially the sexual addiction, can be overcome more easily by fasting.
The whirling dervishes were imaged by brain imaging systems while they were whirling around, and they were praying at the same time, and it was detected that they would feel very pleased at the time. Just like I've written in my book, there are dozens of examples as such. Our Turkish-speaking audience may refer to my book if they are interested. Is a social support religion after addiction. Nature doesn't like gaps. If you take something, if you remove it, you need to replace it with something. And if spiritual and religious requirements are met, the need for other stuff will be diminished too. The religious life offers us an alternative way of living. And it's also social support. The congregation, the mosque you go to, or other places of worship. And we know that the social support provided by the corporate relations or institutional relations have better results in lifting the mood. This is a research that we have conducted with my PhD students. The adolescents, 707 people, were inquired into the scale of social media addiction, and we have realized that there's a negative correlation with the addiction, and the level of worship increases as the social media addiction goes down. In Gaziantep, we have also conducted another study on 479 middle school and high school students. As we have examined the findings, we realized that the online gaming addiction goes down as the religious commitment increases. There are many other researches conducted proving that. As you can see them on the screen. They are conducted in 2019, 19, and 18. There are also international studies conducted abroad supporting these results. Armfield and Holbert, Almenius, Brown and colleagues have also stresses that as the commitment to religion increases, the addiction decreases. Any types of addiction, both on substances and on behaviors, there is the rewarding center in the brain. It is very strong and it is very difficult to overcome. So it requires a teamwork approach. There is psychiatry, different branches of medicine, social workers, dietitians, and financial advisors should also be involved in the teamwork. As a conclusion, religion has been ignored in the current contemporary civilization where the rational mind is in the center. However, paradoxically speaking, this civilization attracts the rational mind with the products such as technology and internet, and leaves the mind weak in the face of impulsive nature. The recent researchers prove that the spirituality and religion have positive impact on mental and physical health. Logotherapy and many other therapy methods, when combined with religion and belief, have a much more prominent role in diminishing the negative impacts of addictions. I know I have extended my time. Thank you very much for your patience. We'd like to thank you very much, Professor Orhan. We have followed with great intention. In summary, we can say that Professor Orhan revealed the importance of spirituality, religion, and religious practices in combating the addictions. Among his detections, one thing attracted my attention about dopamine and its connection with religious practices. So in the secretion of the dopamine plays a great role. There is a lesser dependency on dopamine when you are involved in religious practices. We may summarize it as such. He has pointed out to a great relationship, and he has also interpreted this as prayer, namaz, and also fasting. I also would like to thank you creating this perspective and this genuine approach on that. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, distinguished participants. Now we have 827 participants who are actively following. We see that it goes up to 880. We talked about Zoom fatigue in this session, but we also have to remember the advantage of Zoom. It is also a great chance to be able to be together with such a great number of people, and we are also thankful to the participants. Now we have the Q&A section. I have received a couple of questions. Is there anyone who wants to ask a question? You can also write it on the chat box. So the first question goes to the first presentation, to
participants in your forum. Are there any differences in terms of problems they encounter? If any, what are the differences?
We do have female participants in the forum, and we've seen an increase in more female participants over the last couple of years. It's about 10% of our community at the moment. And the main differences that I notice are they tend to play more social or role-playing type games, more story-based games. They also don't tend to struggle with the need for competition in the same way that I notice many of our male participants do. And they do struggle a bit with the lack of attention that they will be missing out on when they stop gaming as much. Often we've had reports of them playing games like World of Warcraft, where they feel very valued as a part of a guild or a community. And maybe due to them being female, they may be getting quite a bit of attention from different players, and that feels good. I do want to mention that female gamers make up almost 50% of gamers overall, yet in the gaming disorder research, they're very much underrepresented in studies. And I think part of the reason why that could be occurring is that female gamers who are struggling with gaming may be more likely to just lean on social relationships or social structures that they have. They're able to maintain relationships with friends and family in the physical world better, whereas male participants in our forum, they tend to be very isolated without a lot of personal relationships. And so they may be more likely to search for help online because they don't have other people to help them in the physical world.
Thank you. The second question, I am also curious about the answer. How do romantic relationships affect gaming behaviors, positively or negatively?
It can be both. So we see, as an example, I 2 years ago did an experiment for 6 months where I went back and tried playing video games. And I had a very strict limit of 2 hours a day, no more than that. Now, one of the things that helped me at that time maintain balance was that I was living with my girlfriend. And she would invite me to go for a date, go to dinner, go to a movie. And there were moments where I actually declined and said, why don't you go to the movies with, another friend, or, I'll just eat dinner later. But I found that it was an opportunity for me to notice where I was withdrawing and spending more time in games. So it helped hold me accountable because she was aware of my behavior. At the same time, in previous relationships, when I was gaming a lot, we ended up breaking up over it because I was too focused on games. So it can really work both ways, both as a positive to keep you in balance and also as an accountability measure if your gaming is out of control. I think you're muted. There you go.
We have one more questions for you. Did you collect qualitative data such as narratives from that gaming forum through open-ended questions? Do you have any qualitative results besides quantitative statistical results?
We haven't done a full analysis yet, but I'd be super interested in it. So if anyone is watching and wants to take a project like that on, I'd be happy to chat with you about it. And you can send me an email and I'd be happy to discuss it and do it.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kem Adair. Let me check if we have any other question. One question for Orhan Hoca. Orhan Hocam, varoluşu psikolojik danışma ya da
In existential psychology or Rogerian psychological consultancy, how can you combat the addictions? Rogerian requires unconditional love, unconditional acceptance, and unconditional respect. The unique identity, self-realization plays a great role. Does religion have similar sayings? Look at Yunus Emre. We love the human beings due to the Creator. And Mesnevi of Rumi is also a very great source for treatment. So I believe that integrative models can play a great role where belief and spirituality comes together with psychological treatments. I think we can satisfy the spiritual part of the individuals and we can progress better. Thank you very much, Professor Orhan. And I also would like to take the floor to thank all the speakers as well as all the participants hereby. We end the fifth session and we apologize for having extended the time, and we have also replied to questions. And the aftermath will have the sixth session. So I'd like to give the floor back to Cansu Canan. You may have the floor. Thank you very much for your great moderatorship and for the wonderful presentations. Hereby, we come to an end of the session. We have a short break for 11 minutes. So at 3 p.m. we'll be back with the precious speakers. Thank you.